we are up to chapter 20. Chapter 20 is very short, and it just has one little topic, and the topic is the cities of refuge. So I just want to read it through, and then we'll do a bit of discussion about what this is talking about. Okay, chapter 20. When they had finished dividing the land, the Lord said to Joshua, "Speak to the Israelites, designate the cities of refuge about which I commanded you through Moses, to which a manslayer who kills a person by mistake unintentionally may flee. They shall serve you as a refuge from the blood avenger. He shall flee to one of these cities, present himself at the entrance to the city gate, and plead his case before the elders of that city. And they shall admit him into the city and give him a place in which to live among them. Should the blood avenger pursue him, they shall not hand the manslayer over to him, since he killed the other person without intent and had not been his enemy in the past. He shall live in that city until he can stand trial before the assembly, and remain there until the death of the high priest who is in office at the time. Thereafter, the manslayer may go back to his home in his own town, to the town from which he fled." So they set aside Kedesh in the hill country of Naphtali in Galilee, Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, in the hill country of Judah. And across the Jordan, east of Jericho, they assigned Betzer in the wilderness, in the tableland, from the tribe of Reuben, Ramoth in Gilead from the tribe of Gad, and Golan in Bashan from the tribe of Manasseh. Those were the towns designated for all the Israelites and for aliens residing among them, to which anyone who killed a person unintentionally might flee and not die by the hand of the blood avenger before standing trial by the assembly. Okay, so first of all, I want to kind of paint the picture. What is it we're talking about? What is the situation? And actually, this whole issue of cities of refuge is mentioned previously in two places, in the book of Numbers and then afterwards in Deuteronomy. But the most detailed description of the whole thing is in the book of Numbers, chapter 35. So if you go back to that chapter, it starts, first of all, it's very interesting because it starts actually chapter 35, verse 6, and it says here, "The towns that you assign to the Levites shall include the 6 cities of refuge that are you to designate for a manslayer to flee to which you shall add 42 towns." In other words, Levites, as you well know, are not given a territory of their own. They are given cities, which reflects that they have a completely different role in the nation. Their role is to serve God. They take turns serving God in the temple. What do they do the rest of the time? According to our traditions, they are teachers. They are teachers of the nation. What they are not is people who work the land, because they're not given land. They're only given cities, okay? And of course, this is at a time which is a very agrarian-based culture. And so the people in the cities really rely on the people from the farm, and they may be involved in some kind of trade. They may provide services to the people in the country in exchange for the food that the people bring in from the agricultural areas. And in the case of the Levites, we know that they were teachers. We now see that the Levites actually have, at least in 6 of those cities, have another role altogether. They are kind of running 6 cities of refuge. And you can imagine what these cities might have looked like. On the one hand, you have these Levites, and on the other hand, you have these people who are fleeing from blood avengers because they have killed somebody, okay? Now, in every case, they have definitely killed somebody. The question then becomes, have they killed them intentionally, or did they kill them accidentally? So that's something that we will see how that is handled. One of the things that I want to point out, though, is this word blood avenger, okay? In Hebrew, the word is goel hadam, which literally translates to redeemer of blood, okay? What this means, of course, and the reason the translation, at least that I have, and a few other translations that I've seen, blood avenger, is that they are avenging the blood. But it really, the word blood here is used in 2 different ways. It's avenging the blood of the person who was killed, but it's also the person doing the avenging is a blood relative, okay? So in a way, and when you think of it in the context of the word redeeming, there is this concept that's out there. It's not a biblical concept, but it's a concept that the Bible recognizes because it exists, okay? It is redeeming the blood of the relative. Redeeming is a very powerful word. If you think about blood avenger, you think, ooh, oh, why? You really shouldn't be doing that. It's nasty. Enough one death. Why do you need two deaths? But when you hear it with the word redemption, there is something very positive. And I think this reflects a value that is very foreign to us, I think. But there is this idea that if your relative has been killed, it is your duty, it is your responsibility to bring the killer to justice, and not bring him to justice by call the police and have him arrested and brought to trial, but it's your duty to avenge the blood. You yourself are supposed to kill the killer. Now, this is a concept that is very rampant in ancient times, and in fact, even today, extremely prevalent within the Arab societies that we live amongst here in the Middle East. These things still happen, okay? In the Middle East, you have also these clan wars. If someone kills somebody in one clan, that someone from that clan is going to go kill someone in the other clan. And this kind of feud can go on for years. And sometimes they have a ceremony where they can bring peace, and one side will pay the other side some kind of compensation, and they'll slaughter a few sheep, and they'll have what they call a sulha, which is this a ceremony of forgiveness. And that goes on to this very day in the Middle East. Okay, it goes on among many of the Arabs in Israel and surrounding us. Now, of course, it is illegal. There's no question. If somebody goes and kills somebody because they killed his relative, if they catch him, he'll be arrested and he'll be charged with murder. No question. What's very interesting is when we see the biblical treatment of this, what we are seeing is a balance here between respecting this tradition of the blood avenger on the one hand, and on the other hand, but in any case, inserting here the rule of law. So we'll see that in a minute as we look at some of the scriptures in more detail. So let's go now to the book of Numbers, chapter 35, which, as I noted, was where we have the greatest detail of how this actually takes place. So we'll start with verse 9, okay? The Lord spoke further to Moses, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall provide yourselves with places to serve you as cities of refuge, to which a manslayer who has killed a person unintentionally may flee. The city shall serve you as a refuge from the Avenger, so that the manslayer may not die unless he has stood trial before the assembly. Okay? This already gives us an understanding, and it goes on, of course, with a little bit more detail, but this already gives us the understanding what exactly happened. Two people are, I don't know, somewhere. One of the classic examples that are used, let's say in the Talmud, is a fellow is up in a tree and he has an axe or something, I don't know what. He's cutting branches in the tree and the axe falls from his hand, hits this guy. It doesn't have to be an axe, it could be anything, okay? He's up in a tree, he's got something there that's heavy, a rock, an axe, whatever. If somebody walks by under the tree as he's up there, by accident, what he holds falls on the guy's head and he's dead. There was absolutely no intention here. This is because of carelessness, perhaps, but certainly no intent. This is not a murderer, okay? And yet you have a situation that the relatives, what do they know? The guy is dead and this guy did it. Do they care if he did it intentionally or not? Probably not. They want justice to be done. They want this guy to be killed. What is the Bible telling us? That the first thing this guy, as soon as this guy sees, oh my God, I killed somebody, he runs. He runs to a city of refuge. He comes before the city of refuge and he tells the elders what he did. So the first thing we have here is he has to be honest. He has to come and he has to say, I just killed somebody. He can't run away and come into a town where nobody knows him and says, I'm the saint. and I'm going to bless you all. He has to come in order to receive the benefits of the city of refuge. He has to admit, I just killed somebody, but it was unintentional, okay? And he stays there. But look where it says here in verse 12, what I just read, he will stay there until he stands trial before the assembly. So what we have here again is not just a question of a blood avenger who has the right to kill somebody, but on the other hand, this guy has a chance to stand trial. All right, now we have in verse 16, we have a few factors that the court needs to take into, or the judge or whoever needs to take into account in determining, and again, what is he standing trial for? The issue is, he killed someone. The issue is, did he do it intentionally or not? And that is going to be an issue before the court. Because how do you know? Everybody was if I murdered somebody and somebody saw me or whatever, I can go to the city of refuge and claim that I did it accidentally. So we can't turn the city of refuge into a blanket refuge from a murderer. It can only be used as a refuge from someone who killed accidentally. So there has to be a trial to determine whether or not this person killed purposely or accidentally. So here we have some factors. And starting in verse 16, anyone, however, who strikes another with an iron object so the death results as a murderer, the murderer must be put to death. In other words, you have two people fighting, okay? And the guy takes, I don't know, a club in his hand, and he hits the guy with the club. Now, he may say, I didn't mean to hit him. I meant to hit him. I didn't mean to murder him. I just meant to hit him. I want to give him a good blow. But what is the Bible saying? If he already hit somebody, not with his fist, but with this club, okay, you already consider him a murderer. Because if you're going to start hitting somebody with this kind of an instrument that you know is a deadly instrument, you are deemed to understand that there's consequences of your act, and chances are you're going to end up killing the person, okay? And it goes on, if he uses a stone, if he uses, a wooden object, various things. If he's actually striking something with an object, he will be considered to murder him because he should have understood the consequences of his actions, okay? And then look at verse 19, which I find fascinating, okay? The blood avenger himself shall put the murderer to death. It is he who shall put him to death upon encounter. In other words, this is a situation where this person has been brought to court, and the court determined, based upon these various criteria, did he kill accidentally or did he murder someone intentionally, or at least knowing that, with a club, let's say with intent to harm, but because he used a club or used a knife, it's viewed as if he murdered somebody. If indeed the court then rules that he is a murderer, then it is the blood avenger who will actually do the killing, who will do the execution. So I find here this is a fascinating balance. This is recognizing that there is something to this idea of the relative who feels obligated to avenge his relative's death. But it is coming in under court rule. He has, if this guy gets to the court, to the city of refuge, he's protected. He's then brought from the city of refuge to court, he's protected. When he stands trial, if indeed he's seen to have murdered, not killed accidentally, he is executed by the court, and it is that blood avenger who is able to carry out that execution. If, on the other hand, he is found to have killed accidentally, he goes back to the city of refuge, and there he remains. For how long? Let's see. Let's move on. It's verse 24. In such cases, the assembly shall decide between the slayer and the blood avenger. The assembly shall protect the manslayer from the blood avenger, and the assembly shall restore him to the city of refuge to which he fled. And there he shall remain until the death of the high priest who was anointed with the sacred oil. Okay, so he goes back to that city of refuge and he stays there until the high priest of the time dies. Okay, however, but if the manslayer ever goes beyond the limits of the city of refuge to which he has fled, and the blood avenger comes upon him outside the limits of his city of refuge, and the blood avenger kills the manslayer, there is no blood guilt on his account. In other words, if this accidental killer, shall we say, who is supposed to be sitting in that city of refuge. If he leaves the city of refuge, that's it. There's no protection for him. If the blood avenger finds him and kills him, he's not brought to charge, okay? For he must remain inside his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. After the death of the high priest, the manslayer returned to his landholding. So here you have a situation that's very much under law. You could say after let's say the high priest dies, and you could say that the killer, then he goes free. Well, then he could still be vulnerable. No, because the law says that once the high priest dies, there is no more protection for the blood avenger. It basically just sets a period of time by which this idea of having to stay in a city of refuge remains in effect. Okay, so I think it's a very interesting concept. There's a couple things here that I want to point out that I find are very interesting. First of all, the fact that the Bible gives credence to this custom that is clearly not in line with biblical law. We know biblical law is very clear. If you kill, you will be punished. If it's an accident, you're not punished. Why do we give any kind of place for this blood avenger? We're giving him space here. We're protecting, so first of all, you could say you're protecting the killer from a blood avenger because there's a point at which that you feel like you don't have control, okay? This guy is so crazy upset, okay, that he can kill this guy. But that's not necessarily true, because if a year later the high priest dies and the guy leaves the city of refuge, that relative, the blood avenger, could still be furious and want to kill him. So it's not just a question of giving a place to this guy's passion and anger and protecting this guy. There must be something here that the Bible is saying, I'm willing to protect. I'm willing to give a place to. The way I see it is that this is a custom. As I mentioned, now we're thousands of years later. And in traditional societies in the Middle East, not in Jewish society, but in these other societies, this custom remains very much alive and well. I look at this idea very similar to the way I look at the whole concept of slavery in the Bible, for example, okay? People question, how could it be the Bible gives a space for slavery when slavery is evil? Well, at the time that God gave the Bible initially, okay, slavery was an absolutely entrenched institution that nobody questioned. It was kind of like, how can you even dream of running a world without slavery? Okay, and slavery served a lot of functions. It served economic functions, but it also served political functions. Okay, it was part of the way you won a war. You took slaves. The people you conquered became your slaves, and so it was part of a huge system that today, of course, we see as evil, but they didn't see it that way then. Another example, totally different, not something that we would see as weird, but maybe as evil, but something maybe that we have trouble relating to, and that's the whole subject of sacrifices. There are a lot of people today that say, why is it, how many of us can relate to this idea of slaughtering an animal, seeing all the blood, taking the blood and spraying over the altar and all that stuff? How many of us can really relate to that kind of situation and say, this is how I'm going to worship God? I would assume most of us feel like, it's not exactly, how we want to worship God. But all three of these examples, the Bible is coming in and changing things. It is revolutionary in changing things. But I think at the same time, God is recognizing you can't walk in and change everything at once. Because if you try to change everything at once, you will end up changing nothing. There's a concept in Jewish law that says there are decrees that the public cannot obey. That there, and this really is talking about rabbinic decrees. In other words, as situations would arise over Jewish history, there would be rabbinic rabbis and judges and all kinds of things, leaders of the nation, who would say, oh, we have to make some changes. And they had that authority, of course, to add certain restrictions or whatever in order to protect the biblical law. But every so often, someone would come up with something and say, we really should do it. And the rabbis would say, in theory, that's a good idea. Maybe it'll get a lot of people studying more Bible or something, but it's not a restriction that the public will follow. And we have to be realistic, because if we go too far and the public will just say, forget it, I'm not doing any of this. You're asking something that's too crazy. And I think in many ways, this is what God is doing with the Bible. He is saying, there are certain things I am not going to uproot completely. Not yet. That will happen eventually. But at least at this point, we are going to establish rules and regulations to limit the effect. And I think this is what we have here with the cities of refuge. The cities of refuge are not saying it's a free-for-all, because this person who has slayed somebody ultimately will stand trial. And through the rule of law, it will be determined if he killed purposely or he killed accidentally. And if he kills accidentally, he gets the refuge of the city of refuge. But at the same time, the fact that he's not just let free, he has to go and be in a protected place, because there's an understanding that there is something to be said for the fact that this relative wants to avenge the blood. There's still somebody was killed. Somebody died. Okay. And so I think it's not only giving space for this concept of a blood avenger. I think it's also forcing this individual who, whether he wanted to or not, his actions, even if they were unintentional, his actions were clearly careless. And at the end of the day, it cost someone his life. And when someone dies as a result of your actions, there is a price to pay. And here, I think it's particularly interesting that every single one of these 6 cities of refuge were Levite cities. Now, if indeed the role of the Levites, when they're not in the temple, and typically they were in the temple, each one only 2 weeks of the year. So they had, 50, what are the 52 weeks in there? There are 50 weeks in the year that they weren't in the temple. What did they do all that time? So as I said, they were teaching. They were teaching Bible. They were teaching. They were the teachers of the nation. Okay, and their cities were spread out all over the place. They had 48 cities. But in these 6 cities, you can well imagine what their role would have been. It would not just be teaching people how to read the Bible and what God wants us to do. These would have been people that were also be ministering to these people, teaching them. And look, a person who has killed somebody needs to feel guilty. He needs to feel a need to repent. And if he doesn't, he needs to be taught that. So your Levites here would have either been in a position to teach somebody about, feeling guilty, the need to take responsibility in some way for their actions. But at the same time, they could have been a personality that would have been helping this person deal with what he did in a positive way, enabling him to do good deeds, enabling him to be a positive part of the city. You can even see this period of time that a person like this would have been in this city of refuge as a period of rehabilitation, to enable him to come back to society after taking responsibility from what he did, even though he did not do that intentionally. And so I think all of that really here is part of the system that is being set up. Now, I just want to show that I have a map. Let me just make sure I can share it. Where's my sharing? Why can't I share? Oh, here it is. Share. Here we go. Okay, can you see the screen here? Oh my God, I'm not seeing.
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, we see
okay,
it, Sondra.
good.
It looks good.
Good. Okay, so here's the map. I'm going to just adjust the things. This is a tribal map, and I realized I found this map. This is a very good map. Okay, and we're going to use it. I must point out one thing about this map, and that is that where you have here Manasseh in the east, there is a little bit of difference in some of the maps as to how far south and how far north the eastern part of Manasseh is. Okay, I went with this one, but you may see other maps that show it a little differently. Okay, now I'm going to make this a little bigger, and we're now going to see where all of the cities are. So first of all, if I go to, okay, one second, in chapter 20, let's go okay, one second. Okay, so in verse 7, we have the names of the 3 cities that are now being set aside by Joshua. Okay, just as an aside, we in Deuteronomy, I mentioned there was also a mention of the of cities of refuge. In the mention of the cities of refuge in Deuteronomy is in chapter 4, at the end of chapter 4, and then we learned that Moses at that point separated 3 cities on the eastern edge, the eastern side of the Jordan. Explains again very similarly what it's for, and there it talks about 3 cities: Betzer in the tribe of Reuben. So let's see what that is. You see over here, this is Betzer. This is Reuben down here, and this is Betzer. Betzer in the tribe of Reuben. Where are we? Ramot in the Gilead. Okay, so let's look at Ramot. You see this? This is Ramot. Now these are names that by Betzer we don't know about today, but Ramot is indeed the name of a town in Israel, but it's actually up here. So I don't know why we don't have this part is Jordan, but the part up here, this northern part of Manasseh, you see where it says Golan Heights? The northern part of Manasseh is in Israel's hands. This is or part of it. This is the Golan Heights. And you'll notice that the 3rd city on the eastern side is Golan here, and it's called Golan in the Bible. It's Golan in the area of the Bashan belonging to the Manasseh. So it is very often believed that the Golan Heights, as we have today, is the territory of the Bashan, that part that was belonged to Og, king of the Bashan, that was captured. This area here, this whole area here, was captured by from the Amorite and from the Bashan, Og and Sichon. And these 3 cities were then set aside by Moses. We learn about that in Deuteronomy 4. Now we're in Joshua. After they've conquered this part, he is now setting aside the 3 cities. Now the cities that he sets aside here, we have this in, we're back to chapter 20. We have as follows in verse 7, Kedesh in the Galilee in the mountains of Naphtali. So this is Kedesh right here. Okay. And that's in Naphtali. If you think about today, where is this? If you go to, let's see, above the Sea of Galilee, up here, let's say somewhere near here is Kiryat Shmone, and Kadesh is on the mountains. If you're in the Chula Valley, if you go north of the Sea of Galilee and you're in the Chula Valley over here, and you look to the west to these mountains, those are the mountains of Naphtali, and that's where Kadesh is located, north of Chatzor, as you can see. Okay, the next one. Shechem, we know about Shechem. Shechem is down here in Ephraim. It's right here. This is Shechem. And that's a second one. And Kiryat Arba. If we go down, one second. If we go down to Judah and we look for Hebron, it's right here. Move the circle over. I don't know what happened. I moved this and the circles moved. This is where the circles were, but whatever. I'm not sure what's going on, but okay. I'm going to do the stop share now. It's enough. Something weird happened with that. Okay.
I was trying to be helpful.
No, that's okay. So whatever. That's just so that you can see where those places are. What I find very interesting, even though the vast majority of the people and the vast majority of the land was in the western part of the Jordan, they had 3 cities. And the eastern part had the same number of 3 cities. And I always wondered, does that mean that there was an assumption that there would be more problems on the eastern side than on the western side? Keep in mind, by the way, I'm sure that a number of the people who fled to the cities of refuge were real murderers. They take their chances, right? Because they know they're going to have their day in court. And if they can try to get away with it, if there's no witnesses or whatever, they may be released allowed to go back to the city of refuge. We know what happens once you go to trial. Nothing is ever for sure because it depends on your witnesses. So it's I would assume then that your cities of refuge were not just people who were these really people felt terrible because something they did accidentally killed people. You may have also had some real murderers there. Okay. I think there is this sense perhaps that you're going to have a little bit more lawlessness on the eastern side of the Jordan than on the western side of the Jordan. And we're going to see later on in the book of Joshua, we're going to encounter a certain assumption about that too. What was the relationship between the tribes on the east and the tribes on the west? Did they feel a little bit more remote? Did they feel removed from the centers of authority? Did they feel removed from the tabernacle? The tabernacle, of course, was in Shiloh, and that would or should have been a place which would have been the center of God's presence, and those closest to that place would, I would assume, feel more obligated to the commandments. So these are questions I'm going to kind of leave here in the air, and these are things that we are going to continue to pursue as we continue on in the book of Joshua. So that's all for today. Anybody have any comments, questions? As always, open your mics and love to hear from you.
What does the death of the high priest have to do with anything?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it is just a marker in time. Actually, there's interesting things in the Talmud to talk about. The high priests were very concerned because the accidental killer who's sitting in the city of refuge would have had every motivation to pray every single day to God, please end the life of this high priest so I can get out of here. Okay. And so there were definitely things that were done from the high priest and from the Levites to make this guy feel good so that he wouldn't be praying to God and ask him to slay the high priest. The way I look at it, though, is very similar. It's been a tradition in many, many cultures that when a king dies and a new king comes in to office, very often the new king will pardon people. You know, there'll be this ceremony of pardons. And in democracies, that is often preserved. Very often presidents and prime ministers before they leave office, because unlike kings who only leave office when they die, so they really don't know when that's going to happen. But presidents and prime ministers that are democratically switched, okay, before they leave office, there is this tradition. Many of them pardon people that either they feel were there was, you know, there's some justice to their claim, or, you know, they've already served enough time. You know, there's many different reasons. So this could very well fit into this idea when there's a change in the religious leadership. Okay, it's not political leadership, but the religious leadership, that's a time to release those people who would deserve this kind of a pardon. So it seems to fit in like that too. But it could also just be a way of saying, instead of saying for 2 years, you know, finish this guy's office and then move on. Which of course would have been different for one guy to have been a year and for another guy to have been 10 years. But that also is, and you know, I don't want to take too long on this, but I think this is an important thing, that our sages who would discuss this in the Talmud, what's going on here, if a guy indeed was totally innocent and was totally an accident and whatever, why does he have to be away from his family and his land and his city all these years? And one of the things that they say, in other words, they're trying to find a divine justice in this system. And so one of the things they would say is that it's very possible that this guy actually did something, maybe even killed somebody, or did something very serious and was never caught because he didn't have witnesses or whatever. And so this is a way that God then engineers it so that it will come a time when he will kill somebody accidentally, where he is caught, where he isn't going to be executed for that crime, but he will be punished, and that he will be exiled. And that, in a way, there's a certain justice in this whole thing. And so it's very possible that, linking it to the death of the high priest, it may be that God himself, in his machinations, are having the high priest die at the right time, not only for himself, but for when this fellow needs to come out of the city of refuge. I mean, it's very hard for us as human beings to understand how all of that can work, you know, but God somehow works that all out. So it's just food for thought, if that's something that you find interesting.
What happens when somebody kills somebody in self-defense?
Oh, so that's different. In other words, there's a different verse about that. It's I think it's in Deuteronomy. I'll see if I can find it. The example that is given in the Bible is if someone enters your home in the dark. I don't know. It's somewhere in Deuteronomy, it's somewhere in like the 20s or 19s or 20s or somewhere there, where, and I can find it and send it to you as an email. But there's a specific thing that is said if somebody comes into your home in the dark, okay, and you kill him because you're afraid that he's going to try to kill you, you're okay. You're innocent.
Right.
And that, in other words, that lays the groundwork for this idea that if you are believing that someone is about to kill you, you have the right to kill them, to anticipate the issue and to kill him so that you protect yourself.
So that would apply to the IDF today.
Yeah, well, the
Sort of.
idea that that's an army. Okay, an army is very different.
But often they say, well,
army,
I thought somebody was going to kill me, so, or police.
no, but an army, there's justified killing that's beyond self-defense. Okay, if an army is protecting the country, the army is justified, even under the rules of war and international law, the army is justified in going out and killing whoever is there. He doesn't have to feel that this particular soldier is threatening him personally. But the army is going out and attacking because it's protecting the whole country.
It's probably thinking more of, probably thinking more of the police. They say, oh, well, we thought someone was going to tase us.
Police, that's different. Yeah, that happens. But it's all similar. It's all this based on the self-defense. And of course, as in everything, at the end of the day, someone has to make a judgment if that claim of self-defense, as in this case, a claim of accidental killing, if that is true, or if he's just trying to get out of being punished for when it was really intentional.
Right.
Back to the cities of refuge, Sondra, was there ever anything later, like it's not expressed in the Bible, but anything later about whether the family would join him or be allowed to join him, or whether there was any thought of that?
I don't remember. I think it is discussed in the Talmud, but I don't remember what the conclusion is. I don't imagine that there would be a problem, but the problem is also how he supports himself. In other words, again, most of these people have farms. Okay, someone's got to still run the farm and provide support and send perhaps even the support to him in the city. Maybe in the city to find a job. But he doesn't have his land to farm. There's real difficulties here. It's not just like you're going somewhere and you sit back. I'm going to a lot, enjoying the sun for a few years. The high priest dies, and I come home. This whole thing of separating from his family, but also separating him from his livelihood, is a very, very difficult thing. Okay, great to see you all, and see you again next week, same time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sondra.
With pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.